Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers, so we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
All right, everybody. I'm joined today by my friend Chandra Stiles. Chandra, coming all the way from Saskatoon. How are you feeling today?
So good. Beautiful sunshiny day. I love it.
Some people are listening to this episode in the middle of winter. So,
So just remember, sun will come. Summer will come again.
Yes. Well, yes, that's true. That's nice. Okay. You've been on the podcast before, which is super fun, but obviously there's not many people. Although if there's somebody listening and you actually have listened to every episode, I think about my friend Julian in Ontario. I think he's still pretty current on things. I would love to know who is like that hardcore, because that would be so encouraging.
That would be so encouraging.
I would probably
get like a certificate or something.
I would buy them coffee is what I would do if somebody is actually tracked with every episode. But you have been on a couple of times. Fill people in I guess I just said you're from Saskatoon. How long have you been doing ministry though?
Yeah, I have been doing ministry for about 17 years in both church and camp settings. So I've been working with young people for a long time.
Which you've actually do both at the same time.
I do both at the same time, yes.
Some people have I did camp ministry and then I'm in church ministry, but you've consistently had a rhythm, right? Tell people your calendar because it's kind of interesting.
I do have a rhythm. So September to June, I'm in Saskatoon working as a pastor and then doing work on the side for a camp called Camp Kadesh. And then I spend about 10 weeks over the summer, end of June to end of August, working as the leadership and discipleship director at Camp Kadesh. So getting to do a very pastoral role. It's all about like staff leadership development, spiritual care, camper spiritual formation. But my heart is just to see kids discipled for life. So when they get to have an impactful experience with Jesus at camp, the hope is that having strong relationship with churches in Saskatoon would mean that they can bridge into a church or a faith space in Saskatoon that continues to disciple them for the rest of their lives.
So this is brilliant. And this is actually not, people can tell this is not the conversation we're about to have by the title of the episode, but there's somebody listening and you're like, I'm a camp director. I need to hire for the summer months. And I know even where I'm in New Brunswick, we've got a youth pastor at one of our bigger churches and he's doing exactly what you're doing. So smart, because camps always wonder, what do we do with these kids? We got all these kids, where do they go? And would you say that you've had a pretty good retention rate of like staff and or some of those campers because of that church connection back to Saskatoon?
Totally. So significantly. It just makes it so much easier to have a kid see a person or several people and say, oh, I can like follow them back into their faith space. But also camps can do for our students and our young adults, like for their spiritual development and leadership development, camps can do just far more than we can do even throughout the year, because this concentrated time in community, this significant amount of leadership that they get, it just forms them in such a way that a once a week type of program doesn't always do. And so the reciprocity between leadership development at camp and then back into our like youth programming, it's just so valuable. So I have been so thankful for both like the way that we can receive kids from camp, but also we can send kids to camp, and just the beauty of that. I always say I became a youth pastor because I love camp ministry, because camp has something special that you can't recreate other places, but yet the church is where we are discipled for life. And so to build that bridge between the two of them, back and forth, it just feels amazing. So I feel very thankful. I always say to youth pastors, if there's anything you can do, get involved in your local camp some way, somehow. Even if it's just for a day of summer, it works wonders.
Okay. You've just changed the trajectory of somebody's ministry career. So thank you, Chandra, for that one. Okay. Now let's go to this other conversation. So you and I have known each other for a long time. And we were talking before we hit record that one of the things that I've always appreciated about, and this is the cool part. So I've been in ministry on the East Coast of Canada. You've always been in Saskatchewan, but it was just been always fun that we could share stories and learn from each other from across the way. And so you've been intentional about building your team in particular, and then this idea of coaching other small group leaders. So in terms of, again, people listening, some of you are a small group leader, and so you're like, well, I don't need to coach other small group leaders, but you might actually. So the idea, even if you're in a smaller setting, the idea that you could coach a peer or help somebody else, or you got a new leader, even if it's informally, that this is a conversation for you for sure. And then if you are a young leader and you just started into here, you're going to hear a couple ideas that could be helpful that you could give to you're the person that is your point leader or whoever that could actually help coach you. So just give people a sense of what your ministry has grown. Like, you think about this coaching culture at the height of it. What are we talking about in terms of like the number of volunteers and the way that you've tried to structure things so that they could be connected with?
Yeah. So as a youth pastor, I think, the tension that you often work with is that you are both like the pastor to the students, but also the pastor to your volunteers or your leaders. And often your leaders are young people who are just coming into leadership and just like they're hungry for that ability to serve and mentor somebody else, but they need a lot of guidance and support. And so you as a youth pastor can offer that for sure. But after a certain kind of growth or like numerical amount of leaders that you have, there's just no way that you can pour into them all equally. And so for me, it was kind of an out of necessity as my leadership teams grew, just recognizing I need to create systems that support these leaders well, that they know who that they can go to for support and help as they lead their small groups, but also that there's someone tracking their growth, celebrating their growth, pushing them towards growth. And so as when I was running a youth ministry that had both junior high and senior high, two separate leadership teams, there was probably about 70 leaders between the two. I recognized like there's just no way that I as a youth pastor can be as attentive as I need to be to all of those leaders so that I can be optimizing their growth and helping them also then become leaders who help other people grow. And so we implemented something that we call small group coaches. And essentially it was just a system of being able to have point people in place for every small group leader to make sure that there was a weekly check-in, make sure that there was like a sense of understanding their goals and helping them move towards them. And there was a place for prayer, debrief, and resources if needed.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I know sometimes when people are like, that's such a giant team, how could you pastor all those people? Well, you're explaining those people get pastored. They just get pastored not just from you, but from these coaches that get a chance to journey alongside of them. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Okay, so we'll go into like the hyper specifics here, but I know even that as a concept, as an idea, there's some people listening, you're like, oh, I want to know more about that. And so by all means, just reach out, let us know in the show notes. We'd love to have those kinds of conversations, even structuring for a ministry of that size. Do you think, Chandra, like you didn't inherit that kind of group? Like when you started, what was the scope of the ministry, like the youth ministry? Was it quite a bit smaller than 70 volunteers?
Yes. Yeah, it was. When I started, it was kind of just like a dozen volunteers in junior high, a dozen in senior high. And it was kind of like everyone did everything. Yeah. Actually, when I started as youth pastor, there were no small groups. So I created the rhythm of small groups in our youth ministry. But it was kind of like every leader did all the things, which wasn't always effective. It burnt leaders out pretty quickly. So we started to create avenues for leaders to be able to like operate in their strengths. For some leaders, that was being a small group leader and doing something else, like maybe overseeing worship or being a part of a teaching team. But for other leaders, it was also just focusing on just program or just like set up and take down serving behind the scenes. Obviously wanting to elevate how we support the small group leaders, because that's the place where relationships are built and discipleship happens. That's really, like the bread and butter of youth ministry is where they take what they're learning, what they're hearing, what they're processing, what they're going through in life, and they like let it out amongst leaders and students. And so we really wanted to prioritize how do we resource and support these small group leaders really well.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's dive into then when you're thinking about coaching a small group leader, coaching another volunteer. What do you actually do? What does that look like? How do you do it? You kind of referenced a couple of things there, so let's just go to some of the specifics.
Yeah. So the objective of having a small group coach was that every single small group leader would have somebody that they can access on a weekly basis that can help them small group lead in the best way possible. So recognizing that I, as a youth pastor, could not always be accessed on a more one-on-one basis by every leader every week, we wanted to create a space where if that's what they need, they have that. And the goal of the small group coach is to, help them continue in their growth as a leader, but also to encourage the discipleship of their kids. So a small group coach is kind of aware of both the small group leader as well as the dynamics going on in the small group. So we had a few structural things that we did. And for us, because we were a bigger youth ministry, we were doing things that had maybe more of a systematic approach. But, if you're listening and you're in a small youth ministry, you only have a handful of leaders, there definitely can be ways that you can do this informally. You can use the same principles, but maybe have it less structured or systematic. We just had to do that for organizational purposes. So if someone was a small group coach, what usually qualified them for that role in our youth ministry was that they had a bit of a tenured experience. So they had been around specifically our youth ministry, but youth ministry in general for a while. They were a little bit older and they'd had some experience in small group leading of the age category that the youth ministry is in. So for the purpose of having really strong contextual understanding. So this person could be a small group leader themselves. They could be, here I am, year 6. I've been walking with my kids since grade 7 and now they're in grade 11. But then they take on a few other small group leaders who might be first-time small group leaders. The goal was that each small group coach would be equipped and empowered to have a weekly check-in with the small group leaders who they are coaching. So typically, each small group coach would only have anywhere from 1 to 3 people that they're checking in with, because we wanted it to actually be feasible. We wanted them to be able to actually connect and pour into these people. And so that meant we had several small group coaches and we broke all the rest of the small group leaders up amongst them. Often me as the youth pastor had more just because I was capable of having more of those connections throughout the night or even throughout the week. The idea was that there would be a weekly check-in. And whether that was in person on a youth night or if that was the small group coach sending a text and being like, hey, how did this week go? But that there would be a touch point throughout the week. And often I would give some resources to the small group coaches, basically just some prompts for questions that they could ask, especially if they were struggling with what are the best questions to be asking my small group leaders. I would just give them some questions maybe that were contextual to some of the dynamics that were going on relationally in the group, things that we were teaching, or even just ideas of things that they could ask, just so that they're not creating that on their own.
Yep.
And then the hope was that the small group leader is checking in on or the small group coach, is checking in on the small group leader saying, hey, how are you feeling about your leadership? How are you feeling about your co-leader? All of our small groups had 2 leaders. So it's how's the dynamic with your co-leader? Are you hating each other? Are you loving each other? And then what's the dynamics with your kids? How's relationship building going? How's discipleship? What are the strategies you're using in your small group times? So really just a place to kind of debrief and connect, but really an anchor point.
Yeah. So what I'm fascinated by this is that some people you're listening, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. They can ask these kinds of questions. And it wasn't about you giving small group leaders a chance to ask questions. Your small group leader coaches are the ones going and asking those specific questions. It's an active role. I'm not just here as a support person, as a coach. No, I'm actively pursuing you, asking you, how are these things going? How are you doing? And so I think that's interesting because I don't know if if you're a volunteer, this is maybe a bad thing to go to, but when's the last time somebody said, hey, how is it going as you're discipling these kids? Is there anything that you need? The fact that somebody would even ask you that's a gift. That's just so valuable. Totally. So I love that you were intentional about building that kind of system. Okay, so
every leader would respond to that differently. So some leaders need those questions. Other leaders maybe don't need them as much. But the fact that the small group coaches went first and put it out there, as opposed to waiting till maybe something's bubbled up to the surface and kind of needs to explode. It's we're actually tending to those things even preemptively, before there might be difficult things that need to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay. So are those questions that specific? Like, should we just reiterate those ones? Because that could be helpful for somebody. Oh, you should get your supervisor or get your point leader to ask you these kinds of questions. You can give them to them. You just kind of roll through them again. What was number one?
Yeah. So I was asking about like, how are you feeling just personally about your own leadership? Are you trying something new? Are you being more bold? Are you whatever? How did you feel about how you showed up as a leader? How are you feeling about who you're leading with? So if you have a co-leader, how's that relationship going? How are you guys on the same page? And then what's the dynamics of your students? So how's relationship building going? How is discipleship going? Even just management of the students, did you have any students like rip anything off the wall this week? No? Good job. Can be as basic as that, but also then obviously wanting to continually move you forward to progress with the way that you are leading, as well as with how your students are engaging in the small group.
So good. And the idea even on the co-leader side of things, this week might be fine. So you get you might ask that 4 or 5 weeks in a row and we're doing great. But then what a beautiful thing that the one week that, oh no, my co-leader did something absolutely silly. It's such a short account because you get a chance to hear about that right away.
Totally.
Which I think is so wise.
Also, when you're working with young leaders, they do not often have a lot of conflict resolution practice in their life. So that if all of a sudden there's 2 younger leaders, a youth and a young adult or whatever, and they don't know how to work out within themselves a conflict they're having on how to move forward together as leaders, that impacts the kids so much. So if you can step in as a mediator or even just offer some suggestions to resolve that, then that removes the domino effect that can impact the students.
This is a whole aside, but how much of church ministry and how many stories and how much is just conflict resolution, and do we know how to disagree or do we know how to have
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole other podcast.
It's a whole other podcast. There's so much to that. Okay, so those are 3 great questions. So you want to coach small group leaders? Hey, just ask them. Here's a few different things you could go with them. Is there anything else that you would do for your coaches that would help them in that role?
Yeah, so we did try to create structural spaces where our coaches could have interaction with those they were coaching, just for the purpose of making it easier for them. So we would always have leadership team meetings an hour before our youth night started, and every couple of weeks, we would do a supper together where we'd have even more time together. And typically during those suppers, not every single supper time, but often the coach would sit with or connect with their few people that they're coaching. So more of kind of like a small group setting, but then that would be a more lengthened time that we would carve out for them to do some conversations. And that's often where they would do some goal setting and some debrief of those goals. So we would kind of every few months get our small group leaders to set some goals about how are they going to stretch themselves in their leadership? What's a relational goal that they want to have with their students? What's a small group management goal that they might have in regards to actually on a youth night in a small group time. And then what's a discipleship fruit that they'd like to kind of see out of their students. And so we would guide the small group coaches in helping them make some of those really specific measurable goals, the SMART goals.
Yeah, give us an example of what some of those could sound like.
Yeah, so that a goal might be, for example, if it's a brand new leader who has never prayed one-on-one with a student before, they might say, hey, this semester I want to pray one-on-one with 2 of my students, obviously in the appropriate safe place policy types of ways. Mm-hmm. But, having an opportunity to be able to have that intimate discipleship relationship moment with them. Maybe it's a leader might say, I would like to attend 3 of my students' events this semester. And so, the small group coach would be like, okay, well, go find out what events you're gonna attend, and then next week tell me what those events are, when they are, show me that you've put them in their calendar, really pushing them along to make those things tangible. Maybe it's a disciplinary thing of trying to create some new creative ways to get students engaged in small group, or if there's misbehavior or whatever in small group, trying to do some new creative things to get students, redirect them from that type of behavior into maybe something that's a little more focused. Maybe the goal is I would like to see my grade 6 boys have a conversation about the talk for 5 minutes by the end of the year. And so then you try to like create creative strategies to get them there. But the idea is that you're making some things tangible, and you're knowing, and then you as a small group coach are helping them either create strategies to meet that goal and then celebrating when they do, or evaluating when you need to reorient the goal and try for something that's like a little bit more manageable or achievable with yourself or your group.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think, again, for a lot of people that are listening, you like, I thought the goal was just we showed up, and that was like, aren't we? That's all that we're here for. But the idea that you would help people set goals reminds us that the work we do actually has some really clear outcomes that we're going after. Fruitfulness, and these students would love Jesus, and that we might be able to do things that could actually aid and help in that. I think it's just absolutely so brilliant. And the research and all the details on goal setting is so, we're not going to go into that, but like just the act of actually speaking some of these things out and having that level of accountability just jumps the chances that it will all happen.
Totally. And then if you have a good relationship with your small group coach, it also gives you a great place to process if the goal isn't met, or if there's failure, or if there's something that maybe didn't go as you had hoped. And it's a safe place to process that, instead of just like internalizing that and being like, well, I suck at this, I failed at this, I didn't meet my goal, or it didn't go well. And then you're just holding that in. So it is this like idea, because like as youth leaders, as in leadership in general, like failure is a part of our development, but often it impacts us negatively because we don't have a safe place to turn it into something that propels us forward.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I just think like sometimes the act of inviting somebody to set a goal or to think about a goal will spark their mind in a way that they wouldn't have thought otherwise. Like you and I both, so my boss is Sid Coop, and we've been in community with him. And sometimes when Sid's like, hey, what's your fitness goal for this next stretch? I'm like, well, nothing, but now I feel like of course I need to have one because I'm not doing anything, and then all of a sudden I feel seen in the sense, and like I got to do something. So conceptually, the idea of just asking, do you have a goal for your group? Like for group leaders, what a gift to them, and what a gift to your peers. And then also it makes me think like, man, one of the things that we all really want is to be able to experience some type of mastery or some type of win, and like the work that we do, that what we're doing matters and it means something. And when you set those kinds of goals, you can look back and realize, oh yeah, we did accomplish something significant. Totally. And what a gift for that. Okay.
I had a small group leader a few years ago who had a goal of just like wanting every girl in their group to share, and they were really struggling. The girls were really, really quiet. And so it was awesome. We just brainstormed like, what are some of the ways that we could potentially get them to share? And she came up with this idea of like, oh, what if we got little journals or notebooks? And so instead of like speaking out loud, we play a song, they take 5 minutes to like answer the questions, and then if anyone wants to share from that, they could do that. So I'm like, that's an awesome idea. I can buy you journals. We can put them in a bin. You can pull them out every Friday night. And like, it did not take long before every girl would share almost every week, because they had this time to think through their thoughts. Yes. And they knew everyone else was doing that at the same time. And I was like that idea might have been brewing previous to our conversation, but I think it was just something about the collaboration that like brought it out, made it real. We tried it, it worked, and it was like I was able to just celebrate like, this was all you did it, but like look at where it's taken your small group. So that's a really powerful
idea is the best idea I've heard in the last 14 days or so, because I just want to hedge my bets a little bit, but that's fantastic. We got to reiterate that one. I will now share this, Chandra, this is how this goes for the next month with youth workers. Hey, I heard this cool idea on this podcast. Buy journals for your students, ask them a question, and have them write in the journal their thoughts, give them a timer, and then have them share from that. That's brilliant. Absolutely. Okay, I love that. Hopefully somebody listening was served by that more than just me.
Yes.
I'm guessing that's the case. Okay.
I hope so.
Let's bring it back. So as we're kind of wrapping things up, you want to coach a small group. You want to coach them for a lot of different reasons. Another small group leader. You're going to try a few questions. So we got Chandra, we got your questions. And one of them is around goal setting. Can we actually have some intentional goal setting for each other? So if you're listening and you're a formal small group leader coach, this gives you a bit of a grid. If you're listening and you're a volunteer and you're not the coach, but maybe this gives you something that inadvertently you can kind of lean into with your group. Hey, we got there's like 5 or 6 of us. What if we did this for each other? We asked each other these kinds of questions.
Beautiful.
And hey, if you're brand new, what would this look like to actually bring this to your supervisor, to your point leader, and say, hey, could you actually help me in this regard? This could actually frame up our experience together. What a gift that would be. As we kind of come in, is there anything else you wanted to say, Chandra, around coaching small group leaders?
I would say outside of some of those like really tangible, practical questions, the question of like, how can I pray for you, both personally and as a leader, is just always so impactful. And, anytime you get to pray with a small group leader for themselves, their own life or their leadership or their small group, like that's just such a gift. So I think that that's super significant, is being a person who's praying in the background. And I would often encourage my small group coaches to have the list of the people they're coaching, their small group kids' names as well. And so you're just growing to love those kids through prayer, even if you don't know them really well. And I think that can be super huge. Also, I think just being a person to help give them resources or point them towards resources is helpful. And that's where like my small group coaches would come to me as their direct report. So maybe they come to me and they're like, hey, I have this idea for one of my small group leaders. Is this possible? Can they all get journals for their small group kids? And so then that's something as a point person that I was able to do for them. So yeah, being able to just be like knowledgeable with resources or know how to help them access them. And then I think depending on your situation, being a person who just helps them not only debrief their whole year and see their growth, but also to think forward and to think, hey, what does next year hold for you? Do you want to come back as a small group leader? Do you want to maybe take on another piece of responsibility in the youth ministry or the church? Is there another area you can lead and grow your gifts? Just being that sounding board, especially as someone who's watched them intimately lead throughout the year, then it can be really valuable to be a person who helps debrief. And especially if they've had a hard year, sometimes having a person step in and say, like, help them work through that can actually help a leader who maybe wouldn't have come back the next year, be able to be like, okay, I can come back and show up in a different way. So I think those are really, really valuable roles that small group coaches can play as well.
I love it so much. Well, Chandra, thanks so much for your time. Again, I always put my contact info in the show notes. So if people have questions for you, I will filter them back to you. But we'll obviously have you back another time here on the Volunteer Youth Worker podcast. But for all of you guys listening, thanks for what you're doing this week. It honestly makes an eternal difference, investing in the faith of the next generation. And we're super grateful for you. We'll see you next time.